Welcome to Advanced Style Techniques for B2B Writing. We'll give everybody just a minute to join. And of course, I've got our notes here. And my warm-up question as we get back into the swing of things, since we're talking about style, I was curious what comes to mind when you think of style besides Taylor Swift. Love to hear if you have an existing definition of that, or maybe that's what we're here to learn. So what comes to mind when we think of style? Frankly, for me, it's clothes. It's like people who know how to dress well, that kind of thing. So when they walk into a room, everything's intentional. Intentionality comes into play a little bit. And I think we're going to see some overlapping definitions between style that we're thinking of and style that might come out in the writing that we're talking about. So advanced style techniques for B2B writing. And my quote for today, I actually have two. We'll have one now, one later, from Steven Pinker and The Sense of Style, which is a great book about writing and kind of consciousness and how we put thoughts into language. It's really interesting. The first one is, writing is an unnatural act. Haven't heard that before. As Charles Darwin observed, man has an instinctive tendency to speak, as we see the babble of our young children, whereas no child has an instinctive tendency to write, to bake. I'm going to mess that up. Whereas no child has an instinctive tendency to bake, brew, or write. I thought that was so true. And Pinker analyzes this to say, the spoken word is older than our species, and the instinct for language allows children to engage in articulate conversation years before they enter a schoolhouse. But the written word is a recent invention that's left no trace in our genome and must be laboriously acquired throughout childhood and beyond. I thought this was an interesting take on language because so often the conversation around writing, even in the business space, is that you're either a natural born writer or you're not. And I think we can have natural born instincts that make it easier to play with language, think about words, not feel frustrated when we're using words and trying to figure out how to use them. But there is this laborious work that has to be involved whenever learning about writing and getting better at writing. I think that captured that really nicely. So today I want to define style and the different ways we might think about style as a B2B writer. And then we're really going to work. We're going to do some of that arduous work. I have an advanced style rubric where I tried to capture the thoughts that go through my head when I'm evaluating a piece of work. And then we're going to just read. I have two pieces that are just really high quality B2B writing that exemplify some of the things that we're looking for and miss some of the things that we're looking for. And we're all going to have a chance to pause and read these items and then talk about what we see in the pieces. So that's my plan for today. And first, when we think about what is style, I think it's a nuanced conversation because there's two different kinds of style and two ways to think about style when you're a writer. It's a nuanced conversation because there's two significant kinds of style. I think there's a large, overwhelming, abstract definition of style where it's the relationship between words and our culture. And that brings to mind things like class and taste and social currency, balancing traditional and modern reference points, that kind of thing. And an example here might be you could tell pretty quickly if something was written in 1800 or 2020 in a glance, because there's a kind of style that culturally the written word has had over the years. Certainly some exceptions, and we'll see one today. But when we look at words, there's a sense of style that has to do with time and culture. There's also a sense of style that has to do with your personality and the way you express words, the way words. So as a writer, that's going to be integral to creating the work or art with your own voice. In my example there, somebody had already mentioned Agatha Christie and Stephen King. You could tell me if a sentence was written by Stephen King or Elizabeth Gilbert pretty much with a glance most of the time. Right? That would be a really easy thing to do. So on one level, there's style as in our culture and time and what's appropriate, what's high class, what's low class. And then there's a style as in your personal writing style and what identifies a writer by the words that they choose to use and don't use and the way they combine those things. I think all of this is at play. And that's why it's so hard to learn style and to elevate a sense of style because there's a lot of different definitions of it. So welcome, Tony. Let me pop that in there. Stephanie, hey. Another way to feel out the difference, which is what really brings to a point our role as the writer, is that their style is in your craftsmanship and what you can build on behalf of someone else or for someone else. An example there might be someone wants to hire you because you help someone else express their thoughts really well. Like you have that style as a craft that you can use as a tool on behalf of somebody else. And then their style is in your art. So actually as an artist, your style as a writer, fiction, nonfiction, whatever, how you communicate your vision and your essence through words. An example there would be somebody wanting to hire you because you have a unique vision of the world and they want to be associated with it. And I think we could see these worlds blend because some craftspeople, this is where it gets confusing, some people are hired to bring someone else's vision to life. Maybe like a faceless architecture group would get hired to not take credit, but just build the best building. And some people might be hired because they're almost a celebrity and they want to help that person express themselves. So I'm thinking like Frank Lloyd Wright or Madonna. You're probably not going to ask Madonna to help you ghostwrite a song. You would hire her to be associated with her celebrity. Like you would want her style for who she is. Same with Frank Lloyd Wright. You wouldn't want to hire this person or his agency to do the work and then have it turn into a faceless piece of work because the whole point is you want their style. And there's two different parts of that. And so in B2B, I think much more often than not counting micro-influencers and all that stuff, in B2B, we're often signing up to bring someone else's vision to life. And that's where this can get really confusing, where people feel like you need to have a personal brand. But in my mind, that would just be if you were an artist trying to communicate your vision and have people choose you because of your vision. Whereas my approach to marketing is more straightforward. Here's what I do. Here's who I do it for. Here's how I think about those ideas. And that's what gets you attention because you're showing that you have that craftsmanship to be able to help them do something interesting. So in B2B, we're signing up to bring someone else's vision to life, and we want to fill our tool belt with techniques and ideas and inspiration that can help us find the right combination for a client. And it all comes down to we have to read to be able to do this. We have to expose ourselves or be exposed to content that's coming out from other people. And that brings me to my second quote from Steven Pinker, because it's just, if you weren't here a second ago, it's just a wonderful book. It's the thing where I'm only the first chapter in, and I can't stop talking about it. And so I talk about it so much I haven't finished reading it yet, but it's really great. Steven Pinker. Biographers of great authors always try to track down the books their subjects read when they were young because they know these sources hold the key to their development as writers. And it really just goes to the point that what we're reading informs how we're writing. And because writing is an unnatural state, so one of the most important things you can be doing, reading the authors and business books that your clients are reading. The ones that come to mind that the people I work with just can't stop talking about and that come up a whole bunch on LinkedIn and social media. Seth Godin is definitely one. James Clear, Clayton Christensen, Adam Grant, Stephen Covey, Jim Collins. These are all between the 1980s and now, just very notable people who have been influencing the people who hire us. And so if we can cut the middleman, which is our clients, and start reading this kind of content and pick up where they pick up with the Harvard Business Review, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Industry Dive, if we're informing our style from those sources, then we're naturally going to be a better fit for our clients. And fortunately, all of this stuff is really interesting, like tried and true, excellent books. Just Google any of their stuff and it's going to be great to read. Or even summaries of their work. There's a lot of summary sources. So that's kind of my theory of style, where there's a certain element of this where it is about us and our personality and our writing talent. It's important to develop that, especially if you have an interest in writing books someday, or even ghostwriting for other people. But when we're looking at this from the perspective of the B2B work we're doing, it's more about being able to create the kind of work our clients want using the style that they want. And that requires us to be able to navigate between those things. So life is a lot easier when we have a rubric, which is what I made, and it really relaxes things when you feel like you have a checklist you can just run through. But like all rubrics in the world, this is made up. So some of this is going to be helpful, some of it not, and we're going to want to take what is helpful and adapt to what we want to do. But when I am observing how I evaluate a piece of writing in B2B, whether I'm looking at sample work from you all, or I am out in the wild reading, or I'm reading articles that clients really liked and they want to see that applied to the work that I'm doing for them, this is what I'm looking for. There's 4 pieces of it: the introduction, the thesis, word choice, and sentence length. I'm sure this will expand over time, 5 pieces, structure. But these are the ones that really popped up right when I started thinking about this. So for the introduction, you're going to see a lot of this is almost the mirror image of what we talk about in the B2B writing seminar, where these are the things that go into the outline template so that we can be thinking about them and popping them onto the page and trying to achieve it for ourselves. So for the introduction, does the intro state a fact or make a statement that makes me think? Or am I swept away and swept in with an anecdote, story, or example? Those are going to be some signs of really strong style or a really good piece of writing. Is the topic, story, or approach basic or too simple? Am I already feeling bored right as I get started? Are there any metaphors or similes going on that connect this new thing to old things, kind of creating context in the mind of the reader? And is there a sense of explanation, context, and time? Any other senses mentioned? Either could be great, as far as I don't think time is a sense, now that I think about it. Providing some kind of physical or mental abstract location so that a reader knows what they're talking about and from what perspective that they are talking about it. And our examples are going to verify this a bit more too. With the thesis, so the driving mission or statement or goal of the piece, by the end of the intro, do I know that I'd get a question answered if I keep reading? Is it really clear what I'm going to learn about? Do I know what I'm about to explore or why I should explore it? Is there any kind of stakes that would tell me that I should keep going, even if it's just curiosity? Is there a clear problem, a development, or a required action that I'll learn more about? These are all things that would make me read a thesis and then feel that momentum or feel pulled to finish it. Like I would feel incomplete if I didn't keep reading and keep going with this article. Word choice. Are there very many boring words? Is it all transformation, innovation, disruption, like over and over again? I'm guilty of this 100%, but it's something I'm looking for. Have I talked about that too much? Is there a surprising word every once in a while, but nothing too zany or out there that would distract someone, pull them away from the words in a bad way? Are the words identifiable as part of a niche language? Have we sprinkled something in there that makes it really clear who the audience is? And my example here might be healthcare is going to talk about providers, payers, and patients. They're not going to talk about customers or consumers. Whereas e-commerce is going to talk about things like LTV and CTR, which is lifetime value, click-through rate, and customers. They're going to use different language for what they're talking about. Not all of this has to happen each time, but these are the things I'm scanning for and looking for. Next up, sentence length. Is there variation in the sentence length based on the meaning being put across? We've all seen that Amazon email where it's like colored, blocked, and like short and fast and all. It's great. It's like Shel Silverstein for business. But when we're writing, like we get to pay attention to rhythm as well. And we can't just do it to show off because we're actually doing work and we're not making a meme. So not just for the sake of variation, but because there's a coherent line of thought being expressed through changing sentence length. And I did my best to come up with a B example here. But an example could be no variation. Customers love free products. They also love free shipping. They'll come back if you offer those things. Great. That's straightforward. Nothing's wrong there. That's a lot better if I do it with this one. There's nothing customers love more than free product unless it's free shipping. That's how you keep people coming back to your website. And you can see I took these 3 short sentences and I made it into 1.75 longer one with a clause, and then one that kind of had a sense of finality, almost like the conductor with his little baton. But like it has a zing there. And so that's why I think this one has a better sense of style, arguably, than this one, which is error-free, but doesn't... It's so hard to talk about this stuff because it happens in my brain, but I don't understand it. This way, it doesn't have style because it is too monosyllabic. Like it's too straightforward. Right? And straightforward can be a great thing. That can be an element of style. But in this case, I think it weakens it. And this one, I think it strengthens it. And finally, next up is structure. So am I not bored by massive walls of text? Or on the flip side, distracted by endless single line sentences, like it's chaotic? Is it clear someone put thought into how much time to spend on each point, or make sure this is a fair evaluation of each segment of the topic? So it's not like 3 words about one subject and then 300 words about the next subject. That's going to be disorienting to read. Is it clear where an idea begins and ends with the headers and what you're getting out of each of those sections? And there's a really just phenomenal piece on this from Chris Gillespie at Fenwick, which is where this image comes from. But you can see a formless article comes across like this. And that's what technical writing looks like. But most SEO articles are going to look like this. Well-formed article, it's going to have some variation. There's longer, there's shorter, there's some call outs and stuff like that. And then you might see an article that's more chaotic, where it's just single lines, quotes, images, like things are just jumbled in there. Some of this is going to be up to the client and their website layout, of course. But I think when we're writing it, keeping an eye on trying to keep it well-formed so it has the best chance of going out into the world without being chaotic is a really good thing to strive for. And you can see it clicks through to his piece on this where he shares the Amazon thing and talks about pleasant article structure, clear at a glance. And that's what we're looking for. So there's a lot of images like this. So unclear, difficult to produce outline, clear, easy to produce outline, and how that kind of works through all the writing you're going to do. Ooh, so let me pause. Did I miss anything in this rubric? Is there something important that you're thinking like, whoa, why is that not there? So it's been a wild week. That can certainly be the case. And I didn't even kick off saying thank you because this was scheduled for Tuesday and God decided to punish me. I was really sick all day, but I'm feeling 100% better now. But cool. And so my plan is we're going to look at 2 pieces that I think are just really good B2B writing. Like they have their flaws, but they're really good. We're going to take 15 minutes for each piece and then come back and talk about it. So 15 minutes and then come back, then 15 and come back. And I think this is going to do double time in our favor because A, we're reading, which is like the whole point. Let's read about B2B and get better and more acquainted with it. And then C, let's practice our own editorial lens. When we see good work, are we doing a good job of seeing what works about it and what doesn't? And that can only happen by reading. I'd say unfortunately, but we're all nerds and we really like reading. It's part of the beauty of the field is that you're going to be reading a ton. Cool. So I'm going to share our first one. We're going to take time to read 2 great B2B articles. And we're going to try to decode how they're doing this. And then we might start to see how we might do it as well in our own work. And the first one completely caught my eye today. I saw it in a newsletter. Your work is trash. And this is by Nathan Cotney, a census software engineer. And so I have that pulled up here, by the way. And I'm going to share that in the group. Article number 1. And so I'm going to set Brain FM. We're going to do, you all are probably really fast readers. So why don't we do 10 minutes just because it is fairly short. And let's see, as you're reading through, A, just enjoy it. That's totally fine. B, see if you can see any of this stuff going on. Or maybe if it's missing any of this stuff. Could be really interesting. This is Your Work is Trash, which is fantastic. It's just so good. And this is about product development and maybe some of the emotions and feelings that come up when engineers are creating projects and then letting them go, which is a beautiful example of how emotion fits in with thought leadership in B2B and how this is exactly the kind of stuff that we want to be writing, because this is the stuff that people aren't going to cut the budget on this kind of stuff because these are important ideas that are getting out in the world and representing their whole brand. So whether or not this was probably written by this person, so it's not like this was freelance work that's up for grabs, but this is the style of work that I think is a permanent fixture in B2B. All right. So we begin reading and we're going to do focus music. I've been loving the acoustic lately on Brain FM. And feel free to turn the volume up or down or totally off if you don't like that. I'm just going to go for 10 minutes. I'm going to read it as well. All right, coming on back. Restarting the number. Didn't restart. Let's do that. Perfect. So your work is trash, which again, I just love it. It catches the eye. It's fantastic. I wonder the best way to do this. So looking through what I've observed, maybe what did people observe about the introduction? I think this is what inspired me most about this piece, because I feel like the introduction and how it sets the context around the problem is really interesting. A couple of things they did well, just while people are typing, in case you want to share. Setting the context, talking about in time, like years ago, especially being a successful company, looking back to say, years ago, we had a problem. This was the problem, which I thought was described really well. On a Friday afternoon, a couple of us did it. Great, it's done. We're seeing some sentence variation. We're seeing starts and pauses. I think this is a really informal approach for B2B, but personally, I think this worked really well, especially in the SaaS and data space. Being more informal can be a style flex. But that would be something, if you were ghostwriting this for them, that would be something to talk about, is how informal they want to be. Having these short blurbs about blurb. Having these shorter sentences, single word sentences, perhaps not even technically a sentence because there's no verb in it. Turns out it was short-lived. My work was discarded, replaced, thrown out. That is a poetic line, if I've ever seen one. But it doesn't get annoying because it's one line in the midst of all these paragraphs. So I think it's really well done. And Stephanie says, I thought it was going to be derogatory more than inspirational in understanding that your work is a stepping stone. It was a bit more personal or informal, which I did. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. It's a bait and switch because you might read your work as trash and assume this is going to be a teardown, something dramatic. But I feel like he did it really well to turn it around to say, yes, I felt like trash. Maybe I should feel like trash. But oh no, this is a natural part of the development cycle. If anything, this is what has to happen to get to blah, 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 blah. And in my mind, that makes it inspirational because we're saying this frustrating, annoying thing, which, hey, if we're seeing some parallels to freelancing or being a writer, I think we should invite them. This frustrating thing that seems like it's just beating you up the whole time. That's what the growth path is. Like, that's what we're here to do. And I thought that's interesting. And Mike says his message was clear. No work is wasted because we learn as we go. Much better to focus on progress than perfection. Yeah, and that's what I took this as inspirational for me too, because it's the sense that if you look at this, it's not possible to come in at number one with this fully finished car and expect anyone to really know what's happening, right? Like you have to go into that iteration because this car doesn't exist until people need a scooter. They need whatever that is, a bike, a motorbike. This process has to happen, and that takes a lot of pressure off the failure part for me. Linda says, the sense that your contribution is always valuable and don't quit, just keep going, inspirational and inviting to keep writing and working on the small point to get it to the huge point. Yeah, Janice says, a pleasant reading cadence. Totally, found it had a good rhythm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it did a great job of building some tension with the thesis and stuff, but there's something subtle hiding in the drawing that kind of brings us up to, wait, what? Up here there was as well. Maybe I should be looking for new work. Maybe I should be doing something else. This horrible thing happened. Wait, let me show you something. So it adds pressure and then takes it off by showing you something positive. Add pressure, take something off. And that's just interesting because we can look at our own work and say, assuming we're writing about digital transformation in agriculture. I don't know. I'm looking at a bowl of broccoli, so that's what came to mind. How can we figure out something that feels like pressure in the broccoli industry? How can we add pressure to it and then take it off? Would be an experiment that I might take from this. It's interesting. There's also a pivot point here. Deals also have their own kind of landfill. Things don't seem like they work out the way you want them to, but that's what had to happen. Just because it may be replaced, it doesn't reflect negatively on your abilities. Both short-term and long-term thinking are necessary, and knowing when to employ each is a skill you train and exercise. It's beautiful. And Linda says, but thinking the innovations resulting from the process introduced 3 or 4 new things from point 1 to point 5. Totally. Things that you never might have known were needed. Which I imagine the real development loop here was cup holders. I think from the beginning, they just wanted to have somewhere to put the drink, and they didn't get it until 5. It says we can all take away a lesson from. Let me see. Word choice. See, I did feel pleased with the word choice. Nothing really jumps out. Words like obsolete, trash is certainly one that jumps out. Obsolete, replaced. What was the lineup here? Yeah, discarded, replaced, thrown out. Like those are all synonyms. And yet I really like that each one was included. That added a lot of layers for me. So it didn't feel redundant. That's interesting. Wasted. So I feel like word choice was nice. Nothing jumped out as like bad word choice to me. Yeah, nice. And structure, this one's more like a medium because I bet if you put this on any other website, like a full spread, this would be very short lines. But I think because of the way they styled the website, this worked out really well. I bet this is designed primarily for mobile, and that's why you've got maybe 10 words across a sentence, as opposed to this one is about 10 too. Maybe now we're observing website patterns and how they create blogs today. Interesting. Sentence length. Yeah, I definitely saw some sentence length. I think that's what made it feel like stream of consciousness to me, was that the sentence length, when he's explaining something, the sentences get really long, but when he's feeling something, the sentences are shorter. Good observation, Sarah. I didn't pick up on it until right now. So these lines, it's 2 or 3 lines per thing, describing things, giving you this sense of the days went on and here's the situation that happened. Oh no, the bad thing happened. Should I be sad? Replaced? Thrown out? Maybe I should look for new work. I feel like that rhythm was probably on purpose. That's super fun. So I wonder, let's take the same rubric and let's apply it to this one, which is a bit more stiff-shirted. Maybe a bit longer, but it is a lot of bullet points and stuff. So I think it's still very manageable in 10 minutes. So I'm going to share that here. Reading number 2. And again, this is going to be very informative for us because it's about marketing. So this is something that all of our clients are dealing with, whether they're in SaaS or not. If they're in SaaS, they're calling it growth marketing and they're talking about acquisition. If they're not in SaaS, they're talking about marketing and calling it lead generation. So it's all the same thing. It's just how they approach it is different. And I think the theory of customer retention, the theory of economic uncertainty, meaning treating your customers better, I think that applies in all aspects of B2B, whether it's on the SaaS end or professional services and more expensive things. So we'll take about 10 minutes. We'll read this little one. I can't undo that. It comes with, there we go. Can't undo it. Cool. So we'll read through this one. If you want to apply the rubric as you go, totally fair. If you just want to read it and enjoy it, we'll talk about it after. And why won't it restart for me? Is my question. There we go. Countryside. This is going to be a good one. I'll see you on the other side. All right, coming back in. This one was a bit more of a slog, eh? A little less fun, twice as long and half as fun, but very informative. So I'd love to hear any notes you guys have about introductions. I think this was a wildly strong introduction. And I think especially the technical side of things was very cool here, because check it out. Listen to the audiobook.
In the current downturn, many companies
Oh, no, never mind.
are tightening.
That's not good. That sounds like AI.
Already have an ICP defined. That
Yeah, I bet they just used an AI for that. Anyway, it's still a really cool feature for accessibility for people who are on the go, people who just like to listen to things. That's fantastic. And I also love, did you see how they did this? So title, intro, hey, want to keep the copy? Give us your info. I think that's very smooth because it sets it up as if you want a copy to keep, go ahead and give us your info. Otherwise, this is free information. It doesn't feel like it has the same social problems with gated content that people are discussing these days, but it still gives them a chance to do some lead generation. I thought that was really cool. So Mike said, used a quotation for effect in the first sentence, and the second paragraph pulled from the first to present an interesting fact. Right? How cool was this? And I wonder if this has been done a bit before or something, but I totally was into it because this sounds like it could have been written yesterday because this is what's happening in the economy, but it's from 20 years ago. So immediately we are pulled away from really simple concepts of, hey, it's a tough time, isn't it? Don't forget your customer. That would be just fine. That would be SEO style writing. But this really trusts the reader to connect the dots and say, oh, if all of these things have been happening for 20 years now, if not more, maybe there's something to this stuff. Maybe this could be the right answer because it was the right answer back then, and it's going to be the right answer in the future. And then very intentionally, they peppered in all these quotes about like actual stats about profitability. So if more than 75% of your revenue comes from existing customers, you're better off. You grow 1.5 to 3 times faster. Successful sale triples with an existing customer versus a new customer. That's very hard data to pair with this idea about customer lifetime value. I think it's really neat. And Janice says, I really like that. It made me reread the quote. It definitely caught my attention. And Linda says, I recalled reading this information when I worked for a telecom company 20 years ago and how all the dots connected to more business, higher revenue. Gave me ideas on how to address this information now and engage and inform an audience. Totally. But that's not all. I think the strongest part of this is the introduction for sure, because we're commenting on this could have happened anytime. Here's why retention is still the most important thing. It's more of a focus now. And here's what's happening. An influx of, I didn't know this was really cool. An influx of venture capital allowed many marketing teams to double down on acquisition, spending to fill the top of the pipeline and contribute to new revenue without worrying too much about what happens after that. And basically, it's because of investment funds, marketers were able to just push acquisition without actually drawing people in. Like we talk about how content marketing is inbound marketing because customers see it and come after you. Outbound marketing is more like pay-per-click and acquisition and stuff, where you go after the customer and try to entice them in. And so this is saying people got to just pour money into outbound and they didn't really have to worry about whether it worked or not because all they were focused on were those metrics. And this is really complex stuff and it's really interesting. But now we're experiencing a reckoning. And right when it starts to get so technical that maybe we start to drift off a little bit, we're talking about a bathtub, which is like a very physical, common, like we have all at least seen on TV, a bathtub fill with water, right? Even if we don't get to have one. But it's like pulling the plug from a bathtub while the water's still running. The water running is acquisition investment, people pouring money into acquisition, and the water draining is churn. But once you stop pouring water in, churn just completely drains it and the business goes out of business. Things are not looking good. Here's how we fix this. Let's jump in. I just thought that was so well done. As we get through this, I think just a perfectly fine job of defining terms. It does seem like none of the language surprised me or delighted me. So survive and thrive, I drew a little frowny face because Again, I have done this too much myself, so I am not one to talk. But this concept of survive and thrive is tiring. A lot of the language, jumping the gun, low performance metrics, it's simple language. I wonder if that was on purpose, if we wanted this to be more for the public and the everyman. I wonder if there would be a more stylish way to go at it with different words. Who knows? I wasn't there at the start of this. I certainly felt like there was a thesis. The answer was, or the question was, how will focusing on retention improve things? And it's very clear. Number one, you'll thrive, you'll grow faster, you'll upsell easily, and then here's how to do it. Easy peasy, wonderful. I think once it got to this point, it started to fragment to where I think this would be better as an ebook. This is just so much information. And if you look at the different style elements, we've got a bold header, paragraph, quote stuff, smaller paragraph, and then a call out quote with blocking. So it's so much coming at me. I found that to be a little distracting personally. But I bet this works great in the ebook because I would bet money this is all just one page and it gives you one page tips that you can flip through. Still great information, like really well done. I thought this was cool, including some stuff, including a really specific picture of what high value customers bring to the table versus high churn risk. And having lots of bulleted lists. Again, this probably goes off much better in the ebook, which I encourage you to download if you want to. Word choice boring. Sentence length I thought was great. It was consistently short, which I think is good for style of writing. But we're seeing some variation here. Yeah, anything where we're starting the second half of the sentence with or and, I think that adds a nice informality these days if it points to the writer not being too stuffy. So for instance, you might do blank, but then uncover blank, or something else might happen. It's just a nice flow of thoughts. And structure. Like I said, it got a little choppy there for me, for my taste, but that's just me. Again, there's layers of this where if you worked with this client, maybe they would have told you everyone reads on their phone, so it truly doesn't matter what this looks like on the website, as long as it looks fantastic when somebody looks at it like this. And look at that. That does improve. That improves a lot. It's a lot less distracting. Interesting. Yeah, even the part that bugged me, that does not bug me when I look at it on mobile view. So all things to take into account. And they probably see that because they can look at their metrics inside Google or Fathom or whatever they use and see 90% of traffic is mobile. They're going to design for mobile. Nobody's looking at it on a PC. They're not really going to worry about that so much. Just an interesting thought. Cool. And let me see. I think it was really interesting. So there was a really lukewarm quote that I was laughing at a little bit. Yeah, this is, if you want to talk about nonsense speak, the intent of any acquisition effort isn't just to bring in any new customer unit. It's to bring in a customer who generates a large value to the company over a long period of time. I think we could rewrite this to just say, duh. Right? So the intent of getting customers isn't just to bring a customer, it's to bring a customer that pays lots of money. So this is the kind of stuff we're going to see. It made this quote twice as long as it otherwise would have been. Maybe this is how somebody had to hear it for it to really hit. Maybe some people are too focused on acquisition, and so they need to be reminded that it's about quality of the customer. But I think this is a good example of we try to find so many different ways to say the same thing. That's where business jargon comes from a lot of the times. And this would make a great sentence for better than a boss. The intent of any freelance marketing task isn't just to bring in any new lead. It's to bring in a lead who generates a large recurring amount of income for the writer. That's a format that we could use for other stuff. So if you want to be quoted as an expert, you could just use that. Oh, but that is really cool. It's like these ideas just iterate. This is the kind of thing where if you do an interview with an expert and they're like, you know what's really good? Customers who pay a lot of money. Like, yeah, that's great. I need to turn that into a really insightful, like monumental quote that we could put in a design. And so this comes out. So this is the kind of thing where you might hear someone say, high-paying customers are best, and then we would doctor that quote to be like, it's really important that your acquisition doesn't just bring in certain kinds of clients. You want to bring in the paying clients. This is part of the process that we might be a part of. Hopefully we're going to do it really well, but you never know. With this one, I found it interesting. My eyes glazed over through the whole middle. But then once I got to the conclusion, I picked right back up and it was riveting. So that tells me that might have been part of the project spec or project content brief, is that they had this information they had to get through. And so they capped it and closed it with a really interesting conclusion to pull it all together. I thought this was great. Put the stopper in before you keep filling your bathtub. Without retaining customers, it's impossible to achieve sustainable growth. This isn't news. It's something that businesses have known for a long time. We've just had the luxury of forgetting. That's wonderful, right? Because it tells us it's so sensible and it's not trying to rock your world with new information, how you have to spend a bunch of stuff. But this idea of luxury of forgetting, like now that times have changed, what we did before won't work now. I think that's a really interesting, fairly new, I haven't seen that a lot, new way to say that. So now's the perfect time to take action. Here's a couple simple things you can look at. It'll pay off in the long run. CTA. Magnificent. Yeah, and Janice says, I like how they brought it back to the super simple bathtub analogy, just in case we lost people with all the details going on in here. Bring it back to a... Cool. And Linda said, I missed the top part. Yeah, and Stephanie says, I love how you explain that. That for me was the perfect example to explain the situation. We can all relate to the bathtub, and that really caught my eye. I feel like this was more for the general public to make it more understandable. Totally. What a great point, because if this was for a very technical audience, they might already understand that and not need that analogy. In fact, that analogy would turn them off and they wouldn't keep reading. If they were a super advanced audience, then we might say something like, maybe we'd provide the bathtub analogy, but with details that are technical. So if company A is adding 10,000 customers per month, but they're losing 9,000, what happens when they slow down acquisition? Make it a little more difficult to understand. Cool. Linda says, the word choice and informal style makes you feel comfortable addressing a complex, serious issue. I remember discussing these very points with higher management to reduce attrition and increase retention. So this attracts the upper management and how to approach them with the idea. Totally. And Janice likes how they brought back the super simple bathtub analogy towards the end. Yeah, common sense. Yes. Stephanie says, I liked it because it's common sense and it's being honest about it. I think that goes a long way. I think along with the reckoning that marketing is having just around the slowed economy and AI and rethinking content marketing, the idea that people are so sophisticated, they see straight through all the content that's being created, more common sense, more honesty, more transparency. I'm seeing that a lot. People reasoning with people and being very sensible about marketing. I think that's a lot of what Brendan Hufford does. Would be a good person, just a wonderful voice to follow in marketing. And what he had posted this morning is what I saw. Yes. So check this out as a very sensible, honest way to look at it. If he's quoting people to say true attribution is all word of mouth in dark social, the B2B buying process has changed. Nobody Googles things. AI will kill SEO. SEO is dead. Yes, please keep telling people this. Say it louder. Meanwhile, my clients will be enjoying the lack of competition. And then a little zigzag. I think it's a very honest, common sense approach. If everybody else stops doing something and you keep doing it, good things happen. Sometimes. It's magnificent. So that was our 2 exercises. And I do have the additional resource linked here, the Better Than a Bot workshop that is in Circle and is free to everybody viewing this training. So you can see if you want to look at some of those exercises of sentences and maybe taking a more advanced approach to sentences, there's some great things to work through in there. That's fun. Linda says, what I think is that CEOs and marketing managers may just see point 1 and point 5 without the inside pieces. So our job is describing and informing the marketing manager of the inner pieces to success. Yeah, I think that works on a couple levels. One, it's actually instructional. So somebody could take that information and do something. Absolutely. But 2, sometimes they're just showing off their own expertise. And they're showing it off in a way that shows how complicated it is. So they're like, it's even easier. Hire us to do this. Because look, we know all the details and we can even explain it to you, but it's really tough. And you should work with us. I think that's a lot of technical SEO at that point. Sometimes if it's too long a guide, sometimes it's just trying to show off how much they know about the process so that you'll hire them. In fact, that's a lot of white papers, I think, is almost like showing the reader how nuanced it is and how much more there is to think about it and how they would be dumb if they tried to do it themselves because they're not going to take it all into account. It's interesting. And then our role as the writer is being the prism that comes through to say what is too much that would actually overwhelm them and have them stop reading versus what's just enough that would have them intrigued and make them see you as an authority. Like we're weighing those odds from the perspective as a normal person. And then the perspective as a writer, and then eventually as a marketer, as we're learning more about this stuff. So that is advanced style techniques. I would love to hear as you work through these or as you check this out again, as you read more of what the B2B content is that you're reading. If you have anything you want to add to this style rubric, let me know. I'd love for this to be a living document that can grow over time so that we can just have a sense of what we're all looking for when we look at style. Because that's another quote from the book, which I'll just read. To close us off, I should have put this in there. I could spend all day reading. Yeah, so the first chapter really is talking about how all of these problems that we think we have with language have been around since forever. Like since the 1800s, people have been saying people can't spell, people can't punctuate. And so the reason I think this should be a living document, language is not a protocol legislated by an authority, but rather a wiki that pools the contributions of millions of writers and speakers who ceaselessly bend language to their needs, who inexorably age, die, and get replaced by their children, who adapt the language in their turn. Right? So this idea, like, what's good, as funny a meme as that is, changes with you and me. As you write for more clients, you're going to change the definition of what is good for the whole culture of B2B marketing. Let's just be watching those evolutions as we go, because even what we're looking for now, this probably isn't what people were looking for 5 years ago, maybe 5, not 10. And it may not be what people are looking for 10 years from now. We just have to trace that and follow that evolution. Fascinating. You didn't know you were signing up to be an archaeologist, did you? Stephanie says, do you find that the B2B content is geared more towards the advanced style tech, or do you feel like it's becoming more common sense? I find I really prefer to write with common sense and real life relation. Man, I don't know, because I think that goes along the spectrum of who the reader is. I think in tech, when they're making decisions about buying tech, they're going to be more into this advanced style. If we're talking about consumers, common sense becomes a lot more important. Not because people are dumb, though it does seem like that sometimes. I think it's because people are spending so much energy on other things that when they're looking at marketing messaging, the portion of their brain that's available to make a decision is like 10%. So it becomes really important to get to the point, make it clear, strong value, say it, make a decision, come with me, live the rest of your life, is how marketing works with that. So I think it depends. I think if you love common sense in real life relation, that does seem more of a soft approach to it, like with consumers. But there's always going to be an exception of that because there will be B2B companies that want to take a consumer approach to their marketing. Examples fail me at this point. But basically anybody who's trying to be funny on LinkedIn is taking that approach. And so they're going to be more about common sense and relating to people. I do see that, now that I said that, I do see that happening more, but I bet it's more of an experiment at this point. I'm not sure people feel super confident that's working for bigger companies. Interesting. I love it. And if you have any thoughts or things you want to add to the style guide, let me know. I would love to include that